everybody, coming to you live from my truck. No, I'm not touching my phone. See, hands are on the wheel. I know some people are freaked out about me recording vlogs while I'm driving, but honestly, sometimes it's the only time I have to talk on video because I'm so busy lately. Anyway, today I wanted to talk about feeding tubes, and at the end of this video is a segment of me changing my feeding tube, and I kind of had to section it together because I recorded it myself. So I kind of had to piece it together in sections of the process. But I kind of wanted to give you guys an insight on what that's like. But I want to talk to you about when I got mine, why CF patients get theirs, and what my experience has been. And let's start with why CF patients get feeding tubes. So we have a hard time gaining weight. We don't absorb calories, fat, vitamins, minerals like any normal person, and we only absorb about 30% of what we intake, and that's sometimes on a good day. So we kind of have to eat 2 or 3 times as much as a normal calorie diet just to get a normal calorie diet, and we're lucky if we get that. Putting on a pound for us is like an act of God sometimes. And there are CF patients that are pancreatic deficient and they don't have problems gaining weight. I did not get so lucky. And many of us did not get so lucky. And sometimes we hit a point in our life where a feeding tube is put on the table as an option. And that's just, it's not that we have bad appetites or it's our fault that our appetites don't go away. For me, I didn't have very much of an appetite back then. And sometimes it's just flat out. We can eat everything under the sun and we're just not gaining weight. And that's not good because our weight also reflects our lung function. So that's very important for us because our lung function is like the most important thing. And for me, this journey started when I was 12 years old. My mom was at Hopkins with me, and the doctor I should have bloopers reels for vlogs. This is hilarious. But anyway, my doctor had come to her and said pretty much like, Jessica's super thin and she's not putting on weight, and she doesn't have very much of an appetite as it is. And sometimes the CF patients, that's just flat out not our fault. We're high stress people, we're under a lot of stress, and sometimes we're just not hungry. And then sometimes, like I said, we can eat everything under the sun and not gain a pound. Anyway, so the doctor was like, we feel like it's best if we put a feeding tube in. Now, for a lot of CF patients, when this arises, it's when they're younger, like even younger than 12, and they don't really have a say in it, and it's usually best that way because at 12 years old, in so many words, I was like, hell no, this ain't happening. I'm in middle school, I'm getting ready to hit high school in about a year or so, and that was not okay with me. I just wasn't about it. But ultimately, long story short, I had to get one, or I was going to die, or end up in the hospital extremely, extremely malnourished and sick. And so when you get a feeding tube, there's a G tube and there's a GJ tube, or whatever it is. I always go dyslexic and mix it up. But anyway, I'm not really a fan of those. I have a G tube. I think they're the best options for CF patients. And that's just my personal feelings. But I have a Mickey button, and it's a little 2-inch button. It's about maybe no wider than a penny and about 2 inches long. And it's right, I've seen a lot of CF patients where it's really weird positions. It's not really centered on their body, which I find odd, but maybe that's just because I don't really know a shit ton about anatomy. But anyway, mine's centered pretty well, and I like where it's at. But they're really not that hard to take care of. And when you get them, there's always, your typical risks of infection and, it not agreeing with your body, blah, blah, blah. But for me, I got lucky. My mom did a very good job, and I did a very good job of keeping my feeding tube clean. And the first time I got it, I ended up having to have 2 surgeries. The first round, I really wasn't a fan of that GI doctor. Neither was my parents. They left the first feeding tube in too long, and I had to go back into surgery the first time I needed changed because it grew to the lining of my stomach, which is a risk, it could happen. but that's just all about the doctor knowing when to change it, right? And so I didn't really have a good experience in surgery either. When I came out of anesthesia, I hyperventilated, and because I didn't recognize anybody or knew where I was at, so I freaked out and I passed back out. The second time in surgery wasn't as bad because my mom was there when I woke up in recovery. They learned their lesson the first time. So anyway, I did a really good job of keeping mine clean. I think my doctors have complimented me numerous times on how well my feeding tube site looks. And, you know, it kind of makes me wonder, like, what the hell else do they see sometimes? You know, I don't really understand. It's not difficult to keep it clean. It's not like, you know, this huge ordeal. But, and I've seen, when I've talked to other people about feeding tubes, and people have posted in my support group on Facebook, and, you know, private message me and things like that, you know, should this look like that, you know, and I'm looking at it going, do you clean it? Like, do you clean it? Because even now, I don't really have to clean mine. I apologize for my phone keep falling. But I don't really have to clean mine a lot, but I do still kind of, like, you know, take a Q-tip with peroxide and kind of clean the site, especially after I change it. Just to keep any risk of any possible infection coming around. I've had mine for almost 21 years. You know, I don't really think there's any risk of infection, but you never know what could possibly go wrong. Like I wrote it also in my paper the other day. You know, I could write for days on lists of things that could possibly go wrong for CF patients, and you know, you just never know what could happen. But anyway, so I've had mine for almost 21 years, like I said, and I will tell you that it has saved my life more times than I can count. And as much as I hated it when I first got it, I'm glad I have it, and I'm glad I still have it. And there are times that come around for some CF patients that they get the option to take it out, and they do. And that's, you know, I fully support them if they want to. If they can gain weight and keep weight and put it on, good for you. I personally have never been given the option to take it out for a number of reasons, and that's just because my weight fluctuates so much. Even though I have, like, a huge appetite, I don't really put on weight, and I have a hard time keeping it on sometimes. The highest I ever got was 110, and that was in high school. And I was still in pediatrics then. The highest as an adult I got was 108, and last time I was at the doctor's, I was sitting around 101. So I don't know if I'm still in 3 digits. It's the end of summer, and my appetite's been kind of finicky, so I'm about to go back on Marinol. But anyway, that's irrelevant. So anyway, when I first got my feeding tube, I got, we usually get this formula called Nutrin 2.0, and it's about, it's a can about that big, and it's about 500 calories per can. I was on 5 cans for an overnight feeding for 8 hours overnight. So when I woke up, you know, I was full. I didn't want breakfast. And, you know, it was years of this, you know, years and years of my, you know, whole rest of my teenage life, and, you know, most of my life as an adult. And a few years back, I can't even, I want to say maybe 2008-ish, maybe, I stopped using it because I was feeling, I even tried dropping the amount of cans I was doing down to 3. And I just felt crashed all day, and I was not full. I mean, I was full, and I wasn't eating anything till like dinner. And it just wasn't beneficial to me that way anymore. So I quit using it, and I put on weight when I quit using it. You know why? Because I was eating during the day. And the other thing I think of, and you know what, I wonder how I could bring this about to the CF community. And I give my advice to parents and CF patients all the time on feedings, because I switched when I got really sick after I quit eating it, like a couple years later, quit using it, a couple years later, and I ended up in the hospital, and my doctors begged me to start using it again. And I said, fine, I'm going to do it my way on my terms if you want me to use it. And now what I do is I use 2 cans. I tried to up it to 3, but 3 was still too much, and my blood sugars were high and out of whack when I was doing it. That was the other reason I quit using it. I was crashed all day because my blood sugars were too high all day long. But so I tried 3 cans, but 2 is a good balance for me right now. And I do 2 cans, at night for 3 hours right before bed, kind of like a bedtime snack. And hell, I even eat sometimes when I'm using it. And you know what? I can take my enzymes before I use it and at the end of using it, because our enzymes only last about an hour, hour and a half. So all those years of using it, in my opinion, I wasn't getting the full benefit of it because I'm sleeping. I'm not awake to take my enzymes at the proper time. So I didn't think I was getting the benefit out of it that I should have been. But, back then I didn't really, understand a whole lot about it. And now I do. That's just my personal opinion. There's some people that do benefit from using it overnight like that. I just don't think it works for me. And I've had a few other CF patients that have tried it that way and they've gained weight. So at least for me now, I may not be gaining a lot of weight, but I'm doing very good at maintaining my weight, plus or minus a pound or two, which is awesome for me because I usually fluctuate from one end of the scale to the other. And like I said, it's saved my life more times than I can count. I addressed in the paper that I wrote the other day that us as CF patients go through normal stages like anybody else. We go through our rebellion stage and we go through our party phase and this and that and whatever. And there's times where we get sick and we are just not hungry at all. And then there's times where there's events in our life that cause our appetite to just go away. Like a few years ago, I still suffer from anxiety, but it was like to a ridiculous level. And I just didn't have an appetite and I wasn't eating. And if it wasn't for my feeding tube, all those times where anxiety's controlled my life, or, I've gotten sick and didn't have an appetite, or even the fact, even now, even though I have a decent appetite, if it wasn't for my feeding tube, I probably wouldn't be able to maintain my weight. It just fluctuates so much. And that, like I said, that ultimately affects your lung function. And it's never probably going to be an option for me to take mine out. And even if it was, I wouldn't, because I rely on it sometimes. And it's a good thing. The other thing that I had an issue with of having it 12 years old, like I said, I was not that far from high school. And, appearance. A lot of people have issues with appearance. And, I was very self-conscious at 12 years old about myself as it was anyway. Growing up, I got picked on a lot for being so tiny and so skinny, and because people didn't really understand that I had CF and what it was. And, they just didn't know any better. And sometimes most of them were just assholes anyway. I don't care. I'll say it. And I just was really self-conscious, and it took me till I actually hit about halfway through 9th grade for me to kind of grow my attitude to defend myself in the first place, let alone grow my attitude about my being self-conscious and being like, flat out, if you want to stare at it, take a fucking picture, it lasts longer, seriously, or ask me what it is, because I will gladly tell you what it is and why I have it. But don't stare. Don't be rude. And just don't be an ass. It's just rude. So I kind of really grew out of that self-conscious phase. I wanted to wear a 2-piece bikini. I was okay with that. And I've helped a few CF patients, girls, get over their self-conscious issues. And I think I'm very proud of that, because I like being an inspiration to people who are going through these issues regarding appearance and having something like a feeding tube. I've been in the rave scene for the last 15 years, and the funniest thing, I think, is having people confuse it for a piercing. I mean, it kind of is in a weird sort of way, a piercing, but and I always thought it would be kind of cool if you could just change the color of it. That would be really cool. But anyway, that's pretty much really it. There's not really much more I could talk about feeding tubes. I mean, if you have questions, you can comment below and I'll answer them. I've probably tried to record this blog like 15 times driving, because I just couldn't really piece together what I wanted to say and how I wanted to say it. So I know I've been kind of rambling, but I'm going to show you guys now how I change my feeding tube and what that process is. And I change it about every 6 months. And sometimes if I get busy, I'll forget, which is what happened this time. and I almost knocked it out. And yes, that can happen. You can knock it out if it's getting to the point of needing change and the balloon's starting to deflate. I've done it diving off a diving board. But anyway, so here's how to change my feeding tube. Okay, so I'm about to set up and change my feeding tube. I have all my supplies out, which I'm about to show you in a second. And then we'll get started. This is my Mickey button. It's actually 2 centimeter 14 French is what you would say if you were ordering supplies, which is probably Greek to most of you. But so this is the box it comes in. I've already opened it to get started. But so inside you have your you know, basically your guide to proper care and your instruction manuals. And since I've had mine since I was 12 and I'm now 32, almost 33, I don't think I need that. Anyway, so give me 1 second. Let me, oops, sorry guys. I gotta pause it for a second to open the box. This is what happens when you don't have anybody helping you record. Okay, so I've opened the box and you have your gauze in here, which is important, and I'm gonna kind of like, you have to kind of keep it as sterile as possible, but I mean, I'm on my bed, and I'll explain that in a minute of why I'm laying on my bed. But just try to keep it as sterile as possible. I've been doing this a long time, so I just kind of do it my way, and it's worked for me for years. And my doctors are always impressed with how my feeding tube site looks, so I think I'm doing a good job. So normally, I would have 2 of these. One to pull out the old, if there's any fluid left in the balloon of the button. But I'm going to have to kind of wing this and just rinse it when I'm done, because I don't have the extra one because I'm at my boyfriend's house. And the last time I changed my feeding tube was months ago at my parents', and I'm long overdue, as I said. So this, you have 2 syringes. This is mostly for like rinsing your extension. It comes with 2 extensions. This is just your normal feeding extension. And I suck at holding the camera while I'm talking to you guys, sorry. Anyway, so this is your normal feeding extension, and it just goes in your button and locks, and I'll show you how that works in a second. And you close this end, and this kind of clips it to kind of keep any fluids from leaking out or in. And if you do bolus feeding, which I'll explain in a second, that's what this extension is for. And then your little button, my little 2 centimeter 14 French button is right here. This little guy is what gives me supplemental nutrition. So give me a second, and I'm going to set up my stand here so I can kind of show you how we check to make sure this button's okay. Okay, so I couldn't set up my stand, so I'm just going to kind of wing this. So I moved this syringe down to 5 milliliters, which is what this balloon holds. And what we're going to do is just press air into it, and see the little balloon inflates. And we're just going to, hold on 1 second. Like I said, I'm winging this. Gotta love blooper reels, huh? And so we pull it out, and the balloon is not deflating, so we know it's good. So we're just going to deflate it, and I'm going to go ahead and pull my old one out. Okay, so at this point you can see I'm laying down, and what that kind of does is just kind of relaxes your muscles in this area, and lets me pull my other feeding tube out without any, like, you know, pressure or you know, tension that causes pain. It's going to hurt a little bit. I've done this for years, like 20 years, and it still stings every time. So, so like I blew the balloon up, and the new one that I checked, I'm going to deflate the balloon in this one, because I don't think there's anything left, because I've almost knocked it out a couple times, but there's always just a tiny bit left that keeps it from coming out. So what I'm going to do is just put the syringe in the side here and pull back. Oh, there is some left, actually. There's some fluid left. So I'm going to kind of wing this. Sorry, guys. I might have to dismantle some of the, get rid of some of this fluid first, and then go back in, because this is going to be, yeah. Okay. Sorry, I'm disappearing off camera. This is what happens when you try to record these things yourself. So I'm going to put it back in. And I got rid of some of that fluid, so it'll be easier to pull back. And so I'm just going to start lifting and breathing. This always hurts. Whew. And I'm going to set that on the other. And I'm going to rinse this syringe out with some water I have bedside. Normally I use sterile water, but or distilled or whatever you want to call it. But I'm out. So I guess city water that's full of chlorine or whatever will work. You gotta go with the flow sometimes. So I'm gonna fill this up to 5 because, like I said, that's what 5 millimeters. That's what this balloon in the tube takes. And I'm going to dip it in the water to make it moist. Normally, if you have like KY or Vaseline or something, you can do that, but I don't have any. So this sometimes is always the shitty part, is trying to get this button back in. Ooh. Oh, wow, that went in super easy. I'm shocked because normally I'm sitting here fighting it for a minute or two. And so now I'm just pushing the syringe in and filling up the balloon. And then I twist and pull out. And voila! Brand new feeding tube. Yay! Clean button. If you have kind of like, sometimes there's stomach acid buildup around your tube or anything like that, just clean it with peroxide before you put the new tube in, and clean it afterwards as well if you have that buildup. Sometimes stomach acid leaks for me, but it doesn't cause any gunk or whatever, but I can feel the burn sometimes. But anyway, so that's pretty much the gist of it. How I changed my feeding tube. That actually went really well. I'm shocked, fucking shocked, because I usually get a little bit more trouble out of it. So it was definitely, you can tell it's definitely long overdue because that was pretty quick to come out and pretty easy to go back in. So it was definitely ready. Hey guys, so this is the last part of the blog. I'm adding this on at the end because I realized in editing it, I can't even speak English today. Wow. Editing it last night that I forgot to talk about a couple key points that I had mentioned that I was going to talk about. So first is how the both different extensions work, the regular extension and the bolus extension, and what the bolus extension is. So this is your regular feeding extension that comes with your Mickey button, and then when you order supplies every month, they ask you if you need extensions. I get a good week out of one of these if you clean it really well, sometimes more if you're really good at it. Rizzo's trying to get my blog, sorry. And so that's your regular extension, and like I said, it locks into your Mickey button. So here's my feeding tube, and what it does is when you push it in like this, as long as your lock is lined up, then you just turn it and it can't come off. See, it can't come off. I have had a few accidents where the end of the feeding bag has come out of this part because I rolled on it in the middle of the night, but that was years ago when I first got it, and I haven't had any issues with it since, especially because I don't fall asleep with my feedings now. But other than that, that's the regular extension. And the bolus extension is for bolus feeding, which means you pump the nutrient into in that very minute. So it doesn't have like a very, it doesn't take very long to do, basically. And this is just to kind of get like an extra bit of calories during the day other than your feeding. So when I was at my last appointment, I had talked about that I was going to do an extra can of Nutrient 2.0, which is this little guy right here. This is Nutrient 2.0. It's 8.45 ounces, and it's 500 calories of tons of fat, high calorie vitamins, minerals, whatever, in this can. So I get 2 cans, and that's an extra 1,000 calories a day for me. But if I do this extra can bolus during the day, probably before I go work out or breakfast if I'm really finicky in the morning, then that's an extra 500 calories, and that's 1,500 calories a day that I'm getting for supplemental nutrition. Now, what you do with bolus is, this is what your bolus extension looks like. It's not very flexible like the other one. You know, it's real flimsy. And it locks in really weird. So it does kind of the same thing. You have to line up the lock button, and it just locks like that. So I'm going to take it out because I have gunk coming out of my feeding tube, and I had it locked, so that's weird. But anyway, so you have a syringe in your kit as well, a bigger syringe, and when you get supplies every month, they ask if you need syringes. I get probably a good week out of these two before I have to switch, or if I clean them really good, then I don't have to switch them but I do everything I can to keep them sterile. So what you do is you just end up pouring this into a like a bowl or a cup or something. That way it's easier to draw out. And you just draw your full syringe back full of Nutrin, and you hook it in your bolus, and you pump it in. You don't like slam it in your stomach. You're not like, bam, done, you know. And what you do is you pump it in slow, you know. It probably takes you less than a half an hour to do the whole can if you can handle it. Definitely if you start to feel sick, then sorry, I'm like multitasking. Anyway, if you start to feel sick, and then, you know, slow it down or stop it. Stop the bolus feeding, but I haven't had no trouble with bolus feeding over the years, so I kind of just do it at my own pace. And that's what it's all about, kind of figuring out what you can handle, how much you can handle, and at what pace you can handle it. So that's pretty much the only other things that I had to talk about when it comes to my feeding tube. And I hope you guys enjoyed my blog. And if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, whatever, feel free to comment below. I'll definitely get the notification to answer it, and I'll respond, as always. And see you next time.